Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cyberverse. I am your beautiful sentient malware, Nimda.EXE. So, today we are going to be talking about combining and separating a mesh by parts or by material. The last video was very popular. A lot of people appreciated the combining of two armatures, but also I have gotten questions about combining meshes or separating meshes, which also goes into creating models, VTuber avatars, etc. So today we're going to get into how to do just that. So for today, we are going to start with QB rather than starting with the model because there's a couple ways to do this. And I want to show you all the different ways because some ways work better for some people. Some people like using tools. Some people like doing it traditionally. And regardless, it is important to know how to do it both ways. So, for instance, you might notice that a QB here looks a little different than the average cube. For instance, if I go up here and select a new general and don't save, you will notice QB is a flat surface. And what I did there is very simple, is I subdivided QB because QB, when you first get him, does not have any divisions in him. For instance, if we hit tab, which will take us into edit mode, you will notice that QB is a solid object. So in order to separate an object by its various parts or materials, it has to have different parts or materials. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I know, but for some people, they might not realize that that is how it works in a 3D modeling software. And since I am trying to target these more toward people just getting started or that might be a little confused, I figure I will run this as simple as possible. So there are different ways to subdivide a object. I'm going to go over this now as, again, some people may be using a pre-made model and some people may be trying to work from zero. So in order to subdivide your model, you can do it a couple different ways. You can actually add loop cuts to your model, like so, to subdivide it. Or if that's a little too much for you, if you feel like that, if you're not comfortable with that, you can also right click on your model when you are in edit mode and just press subdivide. Using loop cuts gives you more control over exactly where you cut, whereas subdivide allows the software to figure it out for you. Whichever way works for you, and depending upon your situation. That will be really up to you on how you want to do that. When we start combining meshes together in later tutorials, using loop cuts will be more relevant there and then. But enough about subdividing. If you're using an already existing model, you likely won't need to subdivide. But for the purpose of me showing you how to do this manually, I felt it important to understand why QB is divided, and when you open Blender, QB might not be subdivided for you. Oh, and we are using Blender 4.5 again, if you didn't notice it up there in the upper left-hand corner. This should work in just about any version of Blender, but just for confusion's sake, yes, we are in Blender 4.5 again, just like in the first tutorial. At any rate, once you are subdivided, you can now start to separate a model into parts. And it is important to note that you cannot separate a model by materials if you are using, for instance, like QB here, which is consistent of only one material. You will only be able to separate this by the selection rather than materials or loose parts. What does all that mean? Allow me to demonstrate. So, first of all, over here under materials, as you can see, QB has only one material. Therefore, if we try to separate this by materials, you will notice nothing happens. And that is because QB does not have a separate material. So, we're only going to be able to separate QB here by selection. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we'll talk more about materials, selection, and loose parts when we load in a model that has all of those things. But for now, this is just a quick overview of how to do this the default way without using any type of tool. So, from edit mode, if we are going to separate this, we are going to need to select. You can select by vertices, edges, or faces. This is going to be, at least for this example, easier to do by faces. So as you can see, I'm using the select box, and then I am selecting faces. Now, you can turn on X-ray mode to select through the object as such, but sometimes that just doesn't work. So if in the case it doesn't work, where you can see here we missed part of the faces, hold Shift and select the rest of your faces, and you will get everything highlighted. Now, how we separate, as you saw me separate before, is you press P on the keyboard. And here we have separate by selection, materials, or loose parts. Once again, loose parts will not work because this is a single object that just has loop cuts in it or separations. Materials will not work because there are no other materials on QB here. So we'll have to select selection. And as you can see, we now have two separate objects. And if we go back over into object mode, we can actually pull these two objects apart now. So that is how to do it with something like a cube. And then if you wish to rejoin these objects, you will need to select them both. Let me get the camera and lighting out of there because we don't need that. And you're going to want to hit Control J, and it will rejoin those two objects as one. You can see if we tab back over into edit mode, they are now one object again. But this is just an example of a generic object. Let's apply this concept to something like an actual VTuber model or VR chat model or a video game character, say, that you are trying to make, as that is a more practical idea that you will most likely be using if you have found my channel. So for most of this, we are going to be using a tool called Cats. And if you don't remember or didn't see the last episode on how to use Cats, I suggest you check out that video. I'll have it marked up here on how to download and install it. For those of you that remember and were with me in the last video, go ahead and press N to open Cats. And then we're going to need other options. And this will have your materials, loose, shapes, that sort of thing for breaking up your avatar into the various materials and loose parts. Also, the quick access import model we can use, or I tend to just import via the file import. However, we are going to need an additional plugin because we are going to be using a Vroid model. which likely, if you are new to making models or such, you are going to be using, as it will export your model in VRM format. If you are using a .fbx file model, then you won't need to download this. But for others in the scene, as I myself first started with the VRM model before I made my own, we are going to download this plugin. In order to download said plugin, we are going to need to go to extensions.blender.org. And I will, of course, link this in the description for you guys. And here is the VRM format importer and exporter, as well as editing capabilities. This particular program that I'm going to link to is going to be the version for Blender 4.5 that I am using. If you are not using Blender 4.5, or I guess it would be 4.2 LTS up to 5.0, as 5.0 is not supported, 5.0 and above, then you will have to search up your version of Blender under blender.org extensions. But for the rest of us that are using the same program, I'm going to show you how to do this. It's very simple. You just click Get Add-on, and then you can drag and drop this into Blender. Literally just grab, drag, down, and you will be able to drop this in. I already have the plugin, so that is not going to work for me. But if you are a little wary about dragging and dropping things anywhere onto your computer, you can also download and install from disk in the exact same way that we installed Cats last time. If you are unsure how to do that, check out my Cats video and you can see exactly how that works. Now, once you have that in and installed, if you are worried if it's working, you can always go into your add-ons, type in VRM, and right there it is, the VRM format. Make sure it is ticked. Next, we are going to import our model. It doesn't matter which way you do this, if you use the import function via Cats, or if you go up through File and Import, you can see that we now have VRM available. So we are going to grab our model. Mine is going to be avatar sample.vrm. Once you click on it, give it a moment to load. All right. And now that everything is loaded, you are going to have a couple things over in your scene collection. But first, this model is a free model. It is a free to use model. If you really like this model, it is free from Vroid. If you are wondering what Vroid is or how to get it, I will link it in the description below so you can download it and play around with it for yourself. You can borrow one of their free-to-use models, or you can play around with making one yourself. The choice is yours. But over here on the right, you're going to see a lot of colliders. You're just going to want to collapse that for now. We're not going to worry about the colliders in this. However, you will see camera, lighting, and armature similar to our last video. We're going to get rid of the lighting and camera, as we are not going to need those. But if you drop down and open up the armature, you will notice you get pose, armature, body, face, hair, and secondary. Secondary is a VRM format exclusive, which will typically be all of your colliders and your physics information, which is typically going to be used for programs like Unity. Now, my suggestion to you would be, unless you feel really comfortable messing around with secondary in Unity when you start putting your model together, to leave this alone. Otherwise, for me, I'm going to get rid of this just for simplifying this tutorial. If I were to use this model, I already know how to work with physics in Unity. Now, we have a body mesh, we have the face mesh, and we have the hair mesh. Everything has already been rigged. Everything works as is intended. If you are curious more about rigging, I have already done a tutorial on that in the last video. So there's nothing wrong with this model. This model is a perfectly fine model. It will be a very cute model to use and experiment with. For the sake of argument, let's say that you like this model, but you're not a fan of the coat. You don't like the coat, or you want to edit the coat in some way, shape, or form. But obviously, if you try to do anything with it, it's going to move everything else with it, as you can see. And we don't want that, or you don't want that. So you want to edit this coat, but not affect the rest of the model. So you have to separate it from the model. Once again, you can do this in edit mode, but as you can see by the way this model was designed, this is going to be a heck of a lot harder to highlight just the coat when so many of these meshes are overlapping with each other. So once again, you can separate this using something like materials, as I highlighted that spot. And as you can see, we have separated some things, but we have shoes. We do have this. So we're going to see if we actually got the coat just by highlighting that one spot. I highly doubt it. Oh, we did. We did manage to separate it by the materials just by highlighting part of the arm. That is most likely due to the fact that the coat is all one material. But you will have instances where that will not work. You will end up with just a chunk of the coat. There we go. Everything back together as one, just to make sure that it's going to work. Using cats, this actually becomes a lot easier because you can run into difficulty doing it just through Blender. Whereas with cats, if you click on it and click materials, you can also see the name of each material. So there's her skin, her skirt. Excuse me, my voice just cracked. What the hell? Her skirt, her shoes, and this top's cloth right here is the coat. So not only did we get a better result because we also got the skirt and the shoes, but we also got the coat. If you were to want to edit the skirt for whatever reason, or remove it and add something different as bottoms. Now, that is materials. How does that work? Exactly why did it choose those particular parts and materials to break apart? Well, once again, if we click on body and go down here to materials, the answer is right here. Each one of these, we have her body, her shoes, the coat, and her skirt are separate materials attached to the whole mesh of her body. I hope that is clear enough. I hope that's easy enough to understand. I know that's a little vague, maybe a little quick, but if you need more information on exactly how to apply materials to a mesh, that gets a little bit more into building a model from scratch up. I will eventually do a tutorial on that. This is more, as I said, kind of targeted to people who are using pre-made models or just trying to get started and want to mess around with more pre-made base materials and models. But now, what if you wanted to break a model apart by its loose parts? Breaking a model apart by its loose parts serves a number of different functions. perhaps you need to more closely tweak or edit a model by its various parts. Normally, you wouldn't be doing this with pre-made models. You would more be separating by materials in order to change something out or maybe kit bash something together. But if for whatever reason you would need loose parts, you can do very much the same, is highlight the model, click separate by loose parts, and now you get something a little bit more attuned to this. And as you can see, we have a lot more random parts, as that is her arm. That is her arm. I have detached her arm from her body. This can be useful for people who feel a little bit more comfortable or want more control over each individual part of their model. I would not suggest this for most novices, as this can really get confusing. Yes, that is a chunk of her skirt. Don't worry, everything's covered underneath. Worry about violating YouTube or any other terms of service. But as you can see, this can get really, really complicated, but also give you a lot of intricate control over your model. However, now, once you have this all separated like this, how do you put her back together? Say you've done your editing, you're happy. How do I put her back together? Well, you can do it a couple different ways. But the way I have found that is the most intelligent and it works the best is to take all these parts now, and you're going to want to highlight the first of these parts and then go all the way up to the body and shift left click, which will select them all. And then you can use Control J to join them together, or you can go up to Object, Join, which will do the same. Now, one of the things you'll notice is it says body 111, and that is because the first thing I clicked on was a body 111, and the last thing I clicked on was body. So it is important to know that the first thing you click on is going to be the name of the final joined object. If you want it to be body, you're going to need to go body all the way down to body 111 and join that way. And just to show that everything is working fine, we will go into pose mode. As you can see, everything's working. She's working just fine. We can even move her around by her root bone. Now, if you were to want to separate this, say, by selection, for whatever reason, maybe you want to remove one of these sleeves. You're going to need to do that by the traditional in-engine way. So once again, we tab over to edit mode, and then you're going to want to maybe use something like the circle selector or the lasso so that you can select. Oh, first I got to select the object before I do that. My bad. Then tab over into edit mode. But you're going to want to use something like maybe the circle key. And to do that, hitting the wrong button, you're going to want to get real close in here to try and separate as close to that seam as possible. This is where adding in loop cuts might actually be helpful, or using something like the knife tool to cut along this seam here. Now, this is an incredibly advanced technique, at least for someone who might not feel comfortable messing around with their model like this, but always wonderful when you want to get rid of the knife tool and it won't let you. So why exactly would you want to do something like taking the sleeve, just the sleeve off like this? Well, maybe you want to do like a ripped sleeve punk look, possibly. it's hard to say. And as you can see, like, it does still select some weird bits and cause some issues. But again, this is another one of those instances where you would likely separate the jacket. My suggestion, honestly, would be to separate the jacket itself from the model, then edit the jacket sleeve or sleeves, and then reattach the jacket to the model. So, just by those couple examples, you can see how this is really useful for when you want to start to more intricately edit your model and want to get into more detail. I hope this was very helpful for you guys. There's a lot more that goes into editing meshes. I'm going to do another tutorial that gets more into depth of combining meshes and the proper ways to do it, so you don't run into problems if and when later you also want to rig the model. Or again, if you are creating something from scratch. And I know a lot of my tutorials are more tailored toward the person who wants to make or use a model and work with a model that is already made, or they have a lot of more base model components that they are looking to kit bash together for something like a VTuber model, a VR chat model, or maybe you're working on putting models together for a video game. But there's a couple other things, at least as far as mesh combining goes, that I really want to touch base on to save you some problems a lot later down the line. Because when you start getting into bashing meshes together, you're gonna run into problems that you might not understand how to deal with unless you have a lot more fundamentals under your belt when it comes to combining meshes together. That's going to be it for this tutorial for now. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any other questions, if I might not have covered something that you're curious about, please let me know. Again, when we get into meshes and separating and combining, there is a whole lot that goes into it and a whole lot of things that can and will happen. So please, by all means, if you have any questions or if maybe you need more information about something, please let me know in the comments below. And more importantly, like, subscribe, leave a comment, even if it's just something like hi or saw or something simple, because that is how YouTube shows the video to more people if you're still on YouTube. If not, and you are on Vanillo, then by all means, just like the video and you can move on. But I always like comments. But until next time, guys, have a great day and we'll see you around in the cyberverse. Bye bye.